Thanks for San Francisco Running Company for hosting this, and my friends at Ultra. This has been a lot of fun, and we still get to do some fun, do my talk, and we get to do some Q&A. Thank you for coming out on a night like, when I saw this beautiful weather, I thought nobody's going to show up. They'll all be out running somewhere, so thank you for coming. So my talk I call, let me see what's going to come up here. There we go. I call it Never Limit Where Running Could Take You, because honestly, I don't talk about this publicly very often, in fact, hardly ever, but I got hooked on drugs at a very young age. About the age of 14, I was completely lost. Then I traded in drugs for massive quantities of alcohol after that stage. And luckily for me, I picked up running around the age of 21 because it saved my life. So to be the chief running officer at Runner's World, it's a dream. I could never imagine. I went out for that one run, ran 1 mile, almost 36 years ago, changed my life forever, thank God, to the better. And I've lived a dream life since that one day. So I travel the world professing the powers of this great sport. Traveling the world and getting to meet, I always say the greatest athlete I've ever encountered is this woman right here, Sarah Reinertsen, first woman to do the Hawaii Ironman on a prosthetic leg. And I'd say that not because of how fast Sarah did Ironman, or, you know, it's just that she had the guts to do it, to do something that, you know, wasn't in her realm of thought, growing up with one leg as a young kid. But then what she does after she competed Ironman, the way she tells her story and the passion she has, and she's willing to share her story. She's quite a mentor and a beautiful person and a very dear friend of mine. And that to me is the greatest athlete. Someone who overcomes the most, goes out there and shares their story. And then this character, Brian Boyle. This guy, another guy who's done Ironman. This is the finish of the Philly Marathon, and I was the race announcer that day. And he's coming in, and I knew he set a personal best that day, and I was yelling at him, not saying, hey, Brian, I was yelling, cross the finish line, because he wanted to talk to me before he got to the finish line. And I knew he was running a PR, and I was like, dude, get across the line. We can talk and hug and do all that stuff later. But Brian, he was in such a horrific car accident that on impact, his heart was removed from his body. And when the paramedics got there, they never thought this young kid, 17 years of age, could ever live. They literally put him wrapped him up, put him in the, paramedics wrapped him up, put him in the helicopter, flew him to the hospital. And in the 2 months that he was in this coma after that accident, he was pronounced dead 7 times. When this picture was taken, he was crossing the finish line his fifth marathon in 6 weeks. If you could imagine going from being pronounced dead, losing 100 pounds, being in a 2-month coma, to doing what he's doing here. And he has such a passion for life because he saw what it would be like not having life. Because when he was pronounced dead, he could actually hear them giving him last rites, but he was paralyzed from his head to his toe, could not communicate anything. It's an amazing, amazing story, amazing guy. And for some reason, he always says he wants to be Bart Yasso, and I don't know why he says that, but I always say I want to be Brian Boyle because he's got long hair and he's got muscles, he's got all the stuff that I don't have. He walks in the room, all the girls go after him because he's got this surfer boy look about him. So we have a great rapport together, really a nice young man. And then this young lady, my friend Marissa. This picture was taken at Garden of the Gods 10-mile run last year in Manitou Springs, Colorado. She ran 10 miles at age 9 in 1 hour and 34 minutes. And she looked like that when she finished. I never looked that good after any race in my life. She came in, run 10 miles, just smiled and, you know, happy, and like didn't think it was any big deal. And I was like, I gave her an award. I was like, how often do you run? She goes, oh, every once in a while. And then I met her dad, who trained 6 days a week and was like 20 minutes behind his daughter. And I was like, what a gift this kid has. And, you know, someone always asks me, when they see this picture, should a 9-year-old run 10 miles? If you look like that after running 10 miles, the answer is yes. I mean, it's so natural for her, so easy for her. And the big key is it is so fun for her. And we really need to encourage our youth. We baby them too much and say, oh, don't, you know, we're worried about them getting hurt running when there's other things they're doing that are going to hurt them much more long term than anything they could do running. when I finished my life on the run in the, or when I wrote my life on the run, in the intro I talk about runners and I say how, you know, they push themselves beyond limits they ever thought possible. And I get to witness that every weekend. And then I close that intro saying, running may be our connective tissue, but if you open up the door and run through, you'd be surprised where you may end up. And that's my story, like doing races at Mount Everest. There were actually, a year I did this Mount Everest marathon, there were about right around 40 runners. And we walked to the starting line together. We walked for 12 days. We walked 10 hours a day just to get to the starting line, then start running at 17,900 feet of elevation. But every once in a while, I'll be at like the Boston Marathon and I'll talk to a runner after the race and say, how did your race go? And I'll go, oh, I think that bus ride out to the start really killed me. I didn't have a good day out there. And I'm like, I say, you're telling the wrong guy that story. The bus ride can't be that tough. That's the finish line of a race in New Zealand. The stuff that my buddy Chris right here, this is Camp Taji, buddy. That's where I met Chris. I went over with Frank Shorter and we went to do 5K runs. We put 5K runs on in military bases throughout Iraq in 2009 and ran with Chris at Camp Taji. And it was such a joy to take part, to be a part of our young men and women over there serving. And God, it reminds me how easy I have it at Runner's World. You know, I go in my office with a warm latte and it's air conditioned or heated, and these young men and women that we encountered, loved to run with us, but their jobs were very dangerous, and it was amazing to physically witness that. We can never take our freedom for granted. Antarctica, a lot of people want to do the 7 continents. I always warn people, when you go to Antarctica, it's a Russian freighter that takes you there, not a cruise ship. It's not the joyous thing bobbing through the Drake Passage. In fact, the year I did it in 1999. We fit about 140 runners on that Russian freighter. And the first night when we went in the Drake Passage and faced those 30-foot swells, only 3 people did not throw up. I was one of the 3 only because I was rooming with this guy who was a sailor. And I laid there, I was nauseous and curled up in the fetal position, trying not to throw up just because this guy was reading the paper like nothing was going on. I was pretty intimidated, but I hung in there. Some of the pictures, literally the only spectators in the Antarctica Marathon right there. A couple of elephant seals, and then the penguins. The wildlife is just so plentiful and so cool to experience. Leopard seals. It's a magical place, but it's a arduous journey just to get there. And then we physically left Antarctica. Now we're up in the north towards the Arctic Circle, Inukshuk. And my buddy Charlie, this Inuit guy Charlie, did a half marathon on 0 training. I mean nothing. When we got to this remote area called Kingasidjuak, up with the Inuits, this guy claims he's going to do the marathon. And I said, well, I asked him how much he's running. He said, I don't run at all, but I can do a marathon. And I'm like, the race is tomorrow. I mean, maybe I'd rethink this. So I convinced him only doing the half marathon. He did a half marathon on no training, on a pretty rough course, in about 2.5 hours. I was blown away. But then afterwards, I was so curious about this guy, Charlie. He took me to his home, which is really not a home. They live in like a Quonset hut that, they can survive the winters. And he showed me his job at the Inuit village of Kingasidjuak. He's the guy that goes out there, harpoons whales, because they sustain themselves off a whale. So showed me his kayak and his harpoon and how he goes out in the bay and harpoons a whale, and then hopefully does a really good job and it dies very quickly, because then he takes the harpoon, ties it on the back of his kayak, and kayaks to shore with a whale on his kayak, cuts up all the blubber, hauls it back, and shares it with everyone at the village. And I thought, a half marathon was the easiest day of this guy's life. No wonder he could do it in 2.5 hours. It was like a picnic to him. Some of the wildlife we got to see, just incredible. We got to see 13 polar bear in the wild. And when the estimated numbers right now of only 20,000 polar bear left in existence in the wild, to get to see 13 on one trip was pretty special. What a beautiful, beautiful animal. And there's that Badwater race. I sort of did an ultra by accident. I did it as a work assignment. And when I signed up for Badwater as a work assignment for Runner's World. I really didn't know what I was doing. I was not an ultra runner. I was a marathon runner. And I can remember it was like yesterday when I did Badwater back in the 80s, they finished on top of Mount Whitney at 146 miles. And I can remember that race director, his name's Dave Pomple. He said, 1 minute to go to the start of the Badwater 146, and he had this little starter's pistol, and that 146 was like, oh, this race is 120 miles longer than I've ever run. Like, this is not good. And then my two crew people, both Runner's World employees, Jane and Wish, I heard them, they got behind the RV and they thought I couldn't hear them, but I could hear them. And they said, you know, and it's 123 degrees, all that stuff you hear about. And I heard them say to each other, okay, somebody's gonna die in this race. We just hope it's not Bart. And I was like, guys, I can hear you. That's not what I want to hear. And then lucky enough, that gun goes off and then they take off. And then I realized that the other ultra runners in this race were the people I've ever encountered. And now I was going to be one of those crazy people, but it was such a cool journey to run through Death Valley. And this is not what you want to see in a race when you're running along. It's not the prop you want to see. But we did finish on top of Whitney back then. You had to go to 14,495 feet, which is the highest mountain in the contiguous 48 states. So after you run through the valley, get up to the top of Whitney, and then you have to walk 11 miles back to the trailhead to get back to your crew and your people. I knew I had to do that, but I was like so focused to get to that finish line, I completely forgot about that 11-mile walk afterwards. I was thinking like a helicopter would come and get me, but that wasn't in the Runner's World budget for the Badwater race. But it was one of those things that very few people knew about Badwater. That was the whole premise of the story. And then they did the Badwater Bart story, and then Badwater took off. And of course, everyone in this room knows the names: Carnassus, Jurek, Pam Reed, you know, they all did it. And the race became this phenomenal. The times they run today are just unbelievable, how fast they can go. Now they do this 135 miles and don't go up the Whitney Mountain because the Whitney is the trail. Once you get to that trailhead, it is a national park, and the race, it's all permits and all that. Problem is why they can't do it. But we got in a lot of trouble that year because we didn't have permits, but we still went up to the top of the mountain. It was chaos, but it was, for me, it opened up doors. You know, once they realized I would do this, they would send me anywhere, they being Runner's World. If he ran across Death Valley, he'll go anywhere, such as Marathon Medoc in France, where you run the marathon dressed in a theme, whatever the theme is. The year I did it was animals, so I dressed like a penguin. I didn't realize it was going to go up to 90 degrees, probably not the perfect day to run like a penguin, but they really do have 18 wine stops on the course, and they force you to drink wine at every one. I thought I could slide by a couple of them, not happening. They literally physically stop you, hand you your wine, you drink your wine, and continue on. And then I always tell people, never anything new in a marathon, in a race. Well, I firmly believe that until you get to like 25 miles, then you can do anything. At 25 miles, they were handing out vanilla ice cream cones. Oh my God, when it's 90 degrees and you're dressed like a penguin and someone hands you a vanilla ice cream cone, it is awesome, let me tell you. It was so good that I was eating it, walked and ate the thing, and I ran back to get another one and then continued on. I was out, the Medoc Marathon course is open for 6.5 hours. I came in like 6 hours and 25 minutes. It was worth it to be out there taking in the sights. And of course, the Bare Buns Run. I'm gonna go through these. I did this nude race. Wait till you see this picture. There's me finishing. The only guy I ever outkicked in all of running, and I had to be naked when it happened. So I get sent to this work assignment to do this Bare Buns Run where you run completely naked. You can wear shoes, but nothing else. And I was happy that it was 3,000 miles from the Runner's World headquarters and from where I live, and I wouldn't see my next door neighbor there. But what I didn't know is the race would start promoting that I was coming to this race. And they got all this information out. Bart's coming. They gave me bib number 1. They put in everyone's race packet. Bart Yasso from Runner's World wearing bib number 1. And then the race director called me about 2 weeks before the race. He said, Bart, we have so many people coming to the run this year because of you. We had to do a pasta dinner because there's not enough places to eat in this remote area by this nudist camp. So he asked me to speak at the dinner. I committed to it. Never, ever thinking that people would come to a pasta dinner naked, get in the buffet line, get their pasta, and then sit at these tables. And then they're going to throw me up on the stage naked and do my presentation. And I thought, okay. So I find this out literally like 25 minutes before I'm going to talk. And I thought, okay, this will be the easiest presentation of my life. I'm not going to look at naked people eating pasta. I'll just like look over their heads, and I'll get up on a podium, hide behind a podium. I'll do my PowerPoint, and then I'm out of there. Like, see ya, and skip away. I didn't have a podium. They gave me like a cinder block to put my computer on that was like this high, threw me up on the stage. It was chaos. But my colleagues at Runner's World, they always made fun of me when I went on these adventures, and they asked me if I was afraid to do the Bare Buns Run, and I said, yes, I am afraid to do the Bare Buns Run. I didn't want to come back to Runner's World on Monday with some medal that says I was smallest in my age group or something like that. But they were nice to me, believe it or not.
Where do you pin the bed?
They don't give you pins, they give you yarn, and you they gave me bib number 1, which is another thing. I put the bib on your arm, and you just jog down there and run the thing. I honestly, when the race went off, that's when I was the happiest, because I thought, okay, now it's like any other race, only you're not wearing any clothes. But actually, it was an out and back 5K course, and they sent this old guy out on a 4-wheeler, and he had an orange vest on. We knew he was a volunteer, but he didn't wear any pants. So it was literally like, run to the old guy with no pants, go around him, and come back. So when I was running, there were 2 young guys beating me in this 5K, and I thought, like a mile in the race, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to actually win the Bare Buns Run? That would be kind of cool thing. So I thought, I can get these young guys. I was in decent shape back then, so I really tried to bridge a little gap, get closer to these guys, and thought maybe I can beat them on the way back. Well, I did make a little bit of ground, and then went around that old guy with no pants, and then we started coming back, and that's when these 500 people running at you, completely naked, I forgot about those kids completely. Never remembered them again. This work assignment, when I was sitting in my office in Runner's World, I thought it was the easiest work assignment. They said, go to West Cliff, Colorado, and run a burro race. You'll meet Taco Bell, and you and Taco Bell do 10 kilometers together. So I thought, okay, what can go wrong? Well, I didn't know Taco Bell wouldn't like me. This was taken before the race. But eventually I got control of Taco Bell, and you get this 20-foot rope, and then you got this animal that I just met literally 20 minutes before the start of the race, and we get to the start, and this guy comes out with a shotgun, and boom, he shoots this shotgun off, and all the burros jump up in the air because they're scared. Then they touch down, and then they do like a 4:30 mile out of the blocks. And I've never run that fast in my life till this day, just because I was attached to this rope to this animal. And I remember like a mile in the race thinking, I'm going to die in a burro race. Like, what a way to go. I didn't know if my lungs were going to explode or my hips were going to come out of joint, because I was literally getting dragged down the road by this animal. But then at about halfway, not only Taco Bell, but all the burros completely stopped running, and you drag this animal the rest of the way. It is chaos, but sounded pretty easy in my office. My most fun race that never came to fruition. This guy, Jim Crosswhite, wanted to do this race in Chitwan Park in the lowlands of Nepal, which happens to be a reserve for tiger and rhinoceros. Now, Jim knew this, but he was convinced he could do it. Pretty setting where we camped. But the next 2 pictures, the next day, we head out for a run on this trail that the race is going to be on. This is about 3 miles into our run. That's me on the left, my buddy Jim. You could see who was in the middle. And 2 seconds later, I'm not in that picture. And that line you always wanted to use, I didn't have to outrun the rhino, just my buddy Jim, and I knew I was faster than Jim, so I wasn't really afraid. But I said, Jim, what are you going to do if you convince 50 runners or 30 runners into doing this race, and we're running down this trail and we get greeted by a rhino? I mean, someone's going to get killed. So he said, okay. So we ran. I said, let's just run back to camp. We'll get in a 6-mile run, have breakfast. As we ran back to camp, we ran into at least 6 or 7 more rhino. It was chaos. Someone would have gotten killed if he ever did this race. That night, we went out for a run right at sunset along that Nari River. And our Nepalese guide told us, he said, I'll teach you what to do if the rhino attacks us, you run into this tall grass, they call it elephant grass. You run in there and make yourself real skinny like this. And he said, when a rhinos come charging, he goes, they're going by smell, they can't see, and maybe they'll just run by this way or by this way. And he said, maybe. And sure enough, we get chased that night. We could hear the animal, we could see the ground shaking, hear the ground moving, see the grass growing, you know, moving, and we're just, and he just said, run in and make yourself real skinny. So we did it. We all did this thing, and the noise stopped. We didn't get killed, and thank God. But it was crazy stuff that goes on. I've been so lucky to do races in Africa. I'm totally fascinated with the East Africans, why the Kenyans and Ethiopians and Tanzanians are the fastest people in the world, and the running culture in East Africa. And to do Kilimanjaro Marathon a couple times and to get photos like that in Africa is such a magical place. But it is, I tell you, the first time I did Kilimanjaro Marathon, it was pretty intimidating because there were only about 150 runners in the race, but 149 were from Ethiopia, Tanzania, and Kenya, and there was one guy who was not. And when you stand at the starting line and look around and everyone's East African, you're like, oh my God, I'm in the wrong place. And they looked at me and they're like, Bart from America's here. He's a big fat guy. Let's see what happens when a race goes off. It was intimidating, let me tell you. But the beauty of the African people. This guy actually served as a race director. I went up to this guy and I got my Swahili book out that I had, and I thought I was going to lay a couple Swahili sentences on him and really impress him. And he came walking towards me and he closed my Swahili book and he said, we can speak English. I have a master's degree from Cambridge. And I looked at this guy. I'm like, we are in the middle of nowhere. And I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to race these young Maasai kids in this remote area just to see how fast kids are removed from the cities. You know, we always hear about Eldoret, Kenya, and Nairobi, but just in these remote areas. So these kids, I raced out and back, mile out and mile back. Not to try to beat these kids because I knew I couldn't beat them, but just to see how fast they would run and try to get their pictures. And look at that beautiful running silhouette and that style. These kids have never been trained by everyone, never been coached, never done a run like we consider a run. The only type of running they do is if they have to run or want to run. And they were really, really fast. And then I tried to get these young Maasai ladies to run with me, and they wouldn't do it for cultural reasons. And it really made me sad. But what they did do is they took my running medals and they gave me these beautiful smiles. And it reminded me culturally how lucky we are to do what we do, because it doesn't happen everywhere. I mean, these women have been encouraged never to do any kind of sport, and that's why they wouldn't run with me. Things have changed tremendously in East Africa, the women doing so well, but it is in recent years. Tegla Larupe was the first Kenyan woman to win a major marathon in the mid-90s. Many people think that the Kenyans been doing this stuff forever, and it's really not true. And to now see the changes is really cool. We can never, ever take it for granted. And when I got away from my running career as a competitive runner, I liked that ultra stuff and was really into it. And I got sucked into those 50-mile races. The first 50-mile race I did, I came in just a tad over 6 hours. I was able to run that 7:20, whatever it is, 7:20 per mile pace for 50 miles. When I finished my career and did the Comrades Marathon in South Africa with 20,000 other runners, I couldn't even run 1 mile at that pace. Yes, and but this is me where I ended it right there. I was done. I just about killed myself to get to that finish line with Comrades. But I consider Comrades the greatest race in the world because of the changes it has made, the way this race moved the needle on the abolishment of apartheid. That's why I consider it the greatest race out there. And I just had to do it before I ended my running career. And I'm going to close with my favorite word in running, and the word community. This is at the marathon in Bermuda, and I was with the Black Girls Run group. And these women are such a powerful group, the way they do everything together. And it's a group that also in the U.S. has potential to grow tremendously. And they're rallying. This Black Girls Run has taken off in chapters all over the country. And then my favorite piece that I worked on at Runner's World in the 26 plus years I've been there was running with the Amish. To see the Amish gravitate to running, to go out there as an invited speaker to speak to the Amish community, not just the Amish runners, the entire community. And then to watch the Amish race. This was last year. And then this year, the race now, over 200 Amish people either do the half marathon 5K or kids race in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And look at the stride on that kid. I would not want to race that kid at the finish of a race ever. And I don't know if this is relative or, you know, but it's amazing to see how they love the running community. And that's what I love about this sport. It is a powerful community, a great community, so we are lucky ones to be part of it. Never limit where running could take you. Thank you.